now, and then I will send it out.
Cool.
Yeah, that should be sufficient. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
And again, I also want to say I haven't done a check-in of my latest development. Once I do this, you have all these scripts as well. But so the moral of the story is that that you bring the R node up and you get this is the top screen, and in the bottom screen you get an output like that. And the reason some of the errors that you see are as a result of R node not coming up in a validator mode. When the error that you see that says read only is very likely because you didn't tell R node that I need you to be a validator. To do that, you got to give it these parameters, and I can walk you through all of those. I don't want to spend a lot of time on R node right now, unless you want to have a working session. I kind of want to get through the whole thing, give you a summary, and then come back and then go through everything again. Does that sound reasonable?
Makes sense.
Yep, okay. It does.
Okay.
It does.
So let's summarize where we are so far. So we talked about the fact that both RSong proxy and RSong acquisition need have dependencies on the core project. And we also said the core project at this point has not published those dependencies to something like a Maven repo or something like that. So basically, you have to build those locally, put them in and then bring them into your project as unmanaged libraries. And then the third thing that we said is the fact that there is a certain way in which you want to bring R node up, which I will give you more detail in our next session. So let's go back and talk a little bit about the project structure. So I'm going to go back to the GitHub repo again, and I want to go back. I know I'm switching a lot, so bear with me. I'm going to go back to I want to go back to Art Proxy. 1 second. Oh, there we go. There is a diagram here that kind of helps. The whole thing is deployed in Kubernetes, and the latest code base that I have has simplified the deployment. And the project is also used to be built in Circle CI. Now the project is being built in Google Cloud, and I'll give you a walkthrough of all of those also. The idea is once you check in, everything gets built in. There is a Redis slave, and part of the code in RSong proxy is dealing with that. We basically try to memoize everything so we could save round trip going to our node back and forth. The project structure itself, there is the lib folder is the one that I said it holds all the unmanaged libraries. These are the ones that we get as a result of building the RChain core project. So some of these names should look familiar. The Java cup, this is something that if you walk through the RChain developer thing, it will walk you through why you need it. And I haven't been there in a while, so let me try to find it with you here. I think if you just follow this, it's written here somewhere where you go for developers. Developers guide. There you go. So you want to follow this thing in here. And it actually is written very well depending on what your environment is. I built on a Linux machine. Most of the developers on the core team built on Mac machines, and the instructions are very similar on both. At the end of the day, you need to have this JFlex BNFC. Those are the two main dependencies that you have. Once you have those, then you could start building the project. And incidentally, both of these are needed by the row length in order to build the syntax tree. That's really the only dependency. So, any questions on that?
Nope, so far.
Very good. So again, follow this. It is very, very important for you to be able to build the RSong core project locally. Otherwise, you continuously be dealing with things being out of version and not being able to debug. Okay.
Yep, that's well received, Kevin.
Okay, cool. So let me find, I got too many windows open.
That's okay.
Let me find the right one. Sorry. Come on. What the heck? I just worked my way back to it. Sorry. RSong, and then we want to go to proxy. All right, so we talked about the lib and the K8 spec. These are all the deployment scripts to be able to deploy to Kubernetes or for building RNode. And as I said, I've simplified this, so I don't really want to spend a lot of time in here right now till I check my code in. Then let's talk about the scripts. There are a couple of scripts in here. So I showed you the start validator. That's the one. That's how I bring the node up. And then there is an integration test. So basically, once I'm satisfied with everything that I've done, I run this integration test. And the integration test is just uploading and downloading songs, and then verifying that things got uploaded and downloaded properly. I'm not a Python developer, but it's a very simple Python script. Then I haven't really used these two in a while. So this one is just to clean up my environment when I continuously bring node up and down. I probably will get rid of them because again, there isn't really a lot of use for them. So let's go back to the actual Scala code, because I think that's where you probably spend most of your time. Incidentally, because we're dealing with large amounts of data, you kind of want to set up some JVM parameters. So instead of keep setting them up, I have this, as you know, with the universal plugin, if you follow this directory structure, put a universal conf and then put your application INI, the SBT plugin will generate the necessary JVM parameters for you. So that's why these are in there. And these parameters seem to be working for the production deployment. When you run it locally, of course, you and I don't have that much memory, so you want to manipulate these. All right. Going back to the main, the directory structure, basically, I try to keep it as simple as possible, and both projects look similar. Bootstrap, that's where your main is. Both projects run on HTTP4S. You mount your routes. There is a public route, and then we had envisioned that we would apply SSL, and in the next version, I've already set up the Let's Encrypt SSL and such, but I can't make those changes quite yet because, again, as you know, we have to be in concert with the client team, with the mobile device. Since they're still on HTTP, we haven't changed to, we maintain HTTP and we have not changed to HTTPS. But that's the reason for this public and non-public route. So let's, the API, that's basically where the routes are. The middleware is not being used right now, but the middleware is where we collect metrics. And the idea is that you collect metrics at the middleware layer and not in a way that's not intrusive to the routes and take the noise out of the routes. And that's what these are. and we also enforce the cores. So, oops, sorry. I don't know what I did here. There we go. Yeah. I didn't ask. Can you guys see my screen okay? Do I need to blow it up or?
It's good on my end.
No, this is good. This is
Okay.
good.
All right. If I'm going too fast, stop me. Is this? Are we still on the same page? Any questions?
Yep.
So far? Okay.
Yeah, no, it is good actually. I think HTTP4 is similar to Skeletra or other stuff. Yes. Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
Of
Excellent.
course, you might have some questions like, why is HTTP4 instead of Skeletra or something like that. But as a first understanding, why is there's no issue? It's good, really good.
Yeah, no problem. Greg has instructed me to make sure that you guys succeed. And so again, the idea is that I give you a brain dump now, and then let me know when you want to meet again, and we could have pair programming or working session and build the project together.
Perfect.
Sure thing. This is good. Thank you. Go ahead, please.
All right. So then let's take a look at the. I want to go back and look at the Bootstrap. So, and then from Bootstrap we go to the API. So let's for example take a look at the user API next. These status and such, those are required by the Kubernetes cluster. Because this thing runs in a cluster, the cluster needs to make sure that all the nodes are up. So every every half a second, it pings the status endpoint to make sure the nodes are up. And that's why these status points are. They're just say, yeah, I'm up. So there is no value in going through those. So let's go through the user API. And as you can see, there is an API version, which comes from the config file, and then the prefix of user. And that would shoot you to the user API. So if we go back to the user API, and that's in here, so you basically, all the routes here are prefixed with version/user. That's basically what I was trying to get at. So then if they give you a user ID, this is a hack. This is one of the worst things. It's not the worst thing I've done, but I'm not very proud of this part. But it was something that was dictated to us by the client team. They wanted to be able to do a get on a user ID, and if the user ID doesn't exist, then create it. This is, again, it's a hack, but it's something that we were forced to do. And so that's what this code is doing. It says if you don't exist, okay, go ahead and create that user. So the way the flow is we never know who the user is. The user goes through the App Store, signs up, downloads the application. At that time, the mobile client will generate an ID for that user. And that ID that ID is basically what we have here. So that's the reason this hack exists.
Yep, makes sense. Yeah, I think we had one issue when accessing it. We were looking for the post method to create user, and it all ended up with get. Yep.
Yeah. We had endless debate on this, but at the end of the day, they already had a code that was working, so we just had to comply.
Yeah, I got it.
Right.
Business overrides technology.
Right. So yeah, if you go through this, that would tell you how that part is working. So let's see, last login. So you have all those in there, and then the play count. This play count, this is something that we put in. It works, but the mobile device never calls it. This was something that they were supposed to implement, but they didn't, unfortunately. But again, it's there. What else can I tell you? And then there is some error handling at the end. I was trying to basically generally speaking, I try to push the error handling to the very edge of the program, and that's what this is.
Good.
So if there are no questions, I'm going to go to the Song API before I go.
This is fairly straightforward. We can go ahead.
Okay.
This is good.
Very good. So then let's take a look at the Song API. Basically, same type of idea here. We have a get, we have a song, and then they send the user ID. Now, today we only have 3 songs, but at some point, hopefully, when you guys get this thing all rolling, we will have many, many songs. So this is the idea of being able to page through the songs. So they will give you a per page and how many, and then there are sensible defaults in the configuration that if they don't, you just use those.
Got it.
So then there is the song and the song ID, and then when they actually, so let's see, let's walk through this. So it says get song, metadata, song ID, and user ID, and then goes through that. So at this point, we're not retrieving the song. We're basically retrieving the song and the song metadata and the tokens. So then the mobile device at that time takes all that information in and then calls the next API, which is this one, and this one actually grabs the content of the data and it increments or decrements the token. So that's the difference between these two. If it has music, that means it's actually going and fetching the music. If it doesn't, it means it's just getting the metadata. Now, in order to be able to give the mobile client ability to do multi-threading, meaning to make parallel calls to us so they can retrieve all the versions of song and the artwork concurrently, we separated the APIs. So the mobile client makes basically 3 calls. One is to get the artwork, that's a picture on the mobile thing, and 2 calls to this music to get the immersive version and the stereo version. And all 3 calls come concurrently. So that's why this thing is that's why we build it this way instead of packaging everything in one call. Make sense so far?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So going out of API, the next thing that we want to talk about is this repo. So the idea of I don't know if you ever looked at the literature, the domain-driven design. The idea is that you have your repository, which sits between your persistent layer and your service layer, and that's what really this repo thing is. So there is a repo on the very top layer. This is like the template that all the other ones use, and it sets up the gRPC. The gRPC singleton connection, very much similar. I don't know if you guys use protobuf on gRPC or not, but it's not that different from the way you handle database and database connections. You basically try to manage your resources. So it's got a singleton connection, and a lot of the common Rolang snippets of code are in this repo object.
Okay.
So it's no more than 64 lines, and it's literally just building Rolang. Now, if you go to the specific one, for example, the song repo, now this one is doing basically uses the repo and makes the more specific Rolang retrieval, and then uses what's in the right here, import repo. So it uses some of the find by name and other functions that are defined in the repo to build the Rolang. So let's go back there. If you go to repo here, and you see this find by name. So it sends a name, and then it adds the proxy. The proxy is just basically a gRPC proxy. So it adds it there, and it calls a wrapper for this private routine. And this what does a get data by name. It sends the proxy and the name. The get data by name is just, you just have to follow all this. And eventually it calls the rolling proxy, and the rolling proxy is, it should be imported here somewhere. Import, come on. Hang on. Oh, there it is. There it is. Rolling proxy, you send it the host and the port. So if I go here and I go to rolling proxy, so there should be an apply method here, right there. So you basically instantiate one of these by giving it the host and the port. And the way these are all coming from the configuration file. And the way you come to know these is through the RSong core project that I showed you earlier. There is on that page, there is a configuration file that tells you what the defaults are. But this is already set, they're not going to change, so you could just stay with this. I'll walk you through the configuration in a minute. So basically you instantiate one of these. Now this rolling proxy is basically as low level, this is the lowest level of calls that we get. So we come from API layer to repo, from repo to this rolling proxy. And this is where the actual gRPC calls are being made to the R node. Make sense so far?
Yes.
Cool. Cool. So let me go out of here. And same type of things apply for the user repo. The user repo is basically just managing the token stuff. But the way those tokens are decremented and incremented, it's all done at the contract level, which I haven't shown you yet. All right, so what else do I want to show you? This cache layer. This cache layer, it's using the Scala cache memoized, and it's using the Redis implementation because that's the one that we deployed. And it's simple memoized. So basically, it has a time. Those all come from configuration. And it says if it's not in, if I haven't memoized this call, then I'm going to go fetch it. And we can't memorize things locally because we run in a cluster. These nodes come and go, as you know. So it needs to be memoized externally. And that there's only so many options. You could do Redis or memsql or what have you. I chose Redis because I had worked with it before. No other reasons besides that. It could simply be replaced as long as the Scala cache works with a number of different caching solutions.
Wow.
Okay, so going.
Redis is already a good choice.
Sure.
Redis is already a good choice, right?
I'm sorry, one more time.
No, Redis is something good to cope up with. There's no.
Yeah. The nice thing about we have a master slave of Redis and there, and the reason is these. Let me go back to the diagram. So a typical song is somewhere between 3.5 to 5 megabyte. And when you put that on chain, you have to, let me show you. When you put that on chain, you have to convert that into text, which doubles the size. And that's where this hex util is. So basically you get a binary and you do a conversion of that binary to string. So now you no longer are storing 3.5 or 5 megabyte. You're storing 7 megabyte to 10 megabyte, which is a lot of data. And now, if you're fetching, if you're fetching the immersive version and the stereo version and the artwork, that's a lot of data that needs to go through this conversion. There is no way we could maintain a reasonable response to a mobile device with that kind of payload against the blockchain. Not today, not at this stage. So for that reason, we had to introduce some sort of caching layer. And we wanted to be a robust caching layer, so that's why we have the Redis master and slave. But fortunately, it's one of those things that's a deployment thing, not a coding thing. You just do your Kubernetes Helm deployment, and then you don't have to worry about it anymore.
Yep, that makes sense. I mean, the usage looks really good.
Okay, cool. So we talked about these. Now I want to go back to the RSong proxy because the contract is there, and I want to talk about the rolling contract a little bit. Unless you guys have any specific questions.
No, so good so far.
Okay, excellent. Very good. There we go. Acquisition. So in the acquisition, if you work your way to the resources, there is this row folder, and in there is a contract. And so basically, this is everything that you saw in the proxy. All those gRPC calls are gRPC calls to this contract. And the way it's not, I mean, you have to spend some time with Roland to get familiarized with this. Mike Stay wrote the original contract. I made some modifications. Dan Connolly, another very competent Roland developer, made more modifications to this. But at the end of the day, Roland is not like picking up JavaScript or picking up, I don't know, Python. It takes a little bit of doing to get used to it because it's just different. I don't know how much time you've spent on rolling. The nice thing is we have a lot of resources, and we can talk about it. We have a lot of tutorials that walk you through it really quickly. I do suggest getting to know rolling, because you have to work and debug this. And the way I've worked and debugged the contract to get a better feeling for it is I basically deployed the whole contract, and then I run tests against different snippets of it outside of my Scala code, just to make sure that I get a good intuition of what's going on here. So you might want to have a similar approach or a different approach if that works for you. As an FYI, you can also just do an SBT console and then start interacting with different parts of this from your code. It depends on what you feel more comfortable. However way you approach it, I do suggest spending some time on those tutorials to get to know rolling, unless you already have and you feel comfortable with it. So that's a contract. Now, going back to the RSong acquisition itself, the idea of acquisition is basically to create the ingestion pipeline. Now, this is not a complete work. This is not it's an MVP. It's a proof of concept. So it needs. We want to be able to build this in a smarter way. And I have some ideas, and I start working on some things, and I'll be happy to share with you at a later time. All right, so same things that we said about lib applies there. The Circle CI, I need to remove that. So I clean this up tonight or tomorrow, because now we built with Google Cloud. All right, so if I go to source, same idea applies to this universal thing. And so I don't talk about that. Let me show you the application.conf. So we run things out of the environment variables. So as part of the deployment, these things get deployed. When I run things locally, because I don't want to really mess things up and I go from one environment to the other, might work for you, might not. I use this thing. I don't know if you've seen it before. Basically, it allows you to have, it's called Env-RC. It allows you to have customized environment variables per folder. So by me switching from here and then coming back to it, you can see that my environment variables change, this dir env. It's a quick way of being able to modify my environment variables because everything here, not everything, sensitive parameters are on environment variables. All right, enough of that. So same, there is this idea of domain, and this is where all of our case classes are. As I said, the songs have, they could be stereo, 3D is the immersive version. They refer to it as 3D, and JPEG is the artwork. I try to put everything that's, all the things that have time, refer to them as temporal, and usually they have a lower bound and upper bound, and that's what this interval is. Let's see, the metadata described as key value, because I had no idea what type of metadata they were going to give us. Let's see, some information about artist, some information about audio and effect, and then the song itself. I think you could just go through this. And then basically some shortcuts. As I was reading my contracts, I always have spelling errors. So instead of just dealing with those, I put everything in here. That way I know my spelling is consistent.
Okay.
No big deal there, I don't think. The error codes, just to be consistent between all projects, have an enum that has very specific error codes. And then if you look at the proxy later on, you see that there is a correlation between these error codes and the HTTP code that's being generated. So what else? Let's go to, I don't want to go to mock yet. The bootstrap. So this here is ugly, but it's the way that we're batching everything. The idea is that what you see in here from line 49 to line 85, the idea is that all this part will be coming from, I think Greg referred to it as the intake form. So you would go through, let's fast forward a time. Let's say this thing is done and everything is, all the requirements are there and you know exactly what the targets are. So instead of having to hard code these the way they are, they're coming from that intake form. So having said that, let's walk through this. So the first thing that's going to do is it's going to take a command parameter, and the command parameters are going to be either install with capital I, or it's going to be deploy. If it's an install, it's going to install the contract only. And I did that on purpose because I wanted to be able to install the contract, look at stuff, and then deploy. The deploy takes a long time since we're pushing a lot of binaries to the blockchain. So the deploy goes and deploys this Roland contract, and then does a propose. Now, again, the analogy is a database. You do a store, and then after the store, you have to do a commit. That's what the propose is. If you do it until you do a propose, the blocks are not finalized. So that's why you see these two there. Now if you're doing so that's the install. Now, if you're doing a deploy, the assumption is that you've already installed the contract, and you've installed the contract only once. You don't want to install the contract twice. If you install the contract twice, now things are ambiguous because you have two contracts under the same name, and I don't know which one you're interacting with. So you never want to install twice. You just want to install once.
On the or node will throw the error whether the same.
No.
Yeah. Okay. Fine.
Yeah, I'm afraid it doesn't.
Okay.
Yeah, because there are very legitimate cases that you may want to have a contract deployed multiple times. They may have the same name, but they may be slightly different, or they may be additive to each other. In this case, they're not. It was an error that we just run the program twice, so we have the same contract deployed twice.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
And one more doubt on the line of you have specified local path variable. Can you go top? And the line number is 17. You have mentioned the local path, RSong path. Here you have left a space between R chain as well as and between assets. Is there any specific reason? What is the meaning of that?
Yeah, the reason is that Immersion wanted it that way. It was very source subject. They have spaces all over their file names. Again, by the time we came to picture, they had already done this, so we just had to deal with it. Yeah, the actual file has this in there. This is a mistake on my part. This should not be there. It's not Kayvon. They're actually on S3. So I need to make a note for myself to fix this. But take this part out. If you take the directory part out, the actual asset does have space in it.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, good catch. Yeah, so deploy. So the deploy is actually when the assets are being pushed to the blockchain, and that's this part. Now, because we either want everything deployed or nothing deployed, as you can see, there is like a bunch of deploys. So we load asset, load asset, load asset, and then at the very end, we do a propose. So all of these things are being deployed, and then once we're done, we do a propose. So that's why you see that difference.
So could you give some context on the IZ or file format?
Any specific reason for choosing that?
I'm sorry, one more time.
IZ or file format, the file extension.
Yeah, so that's the pro priority codec that Immersive has for transcoding music. That's something that they have chosen for their file names.
Okay, transcoding of music files. That's chosen by the client, you mean?
Yeah. Okay. So when let's go back to, let me open a different window. I don't know if I did yet. All right, so if I go to proxy, the Immersive pushes once they transcode the music and all the related file, they put it in a cloud. Mm-hmm. And that's where all these files are coming from, and they're all called IZR. If they're music, they end with .izr.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, so that's basically what the main does. It pushes everything in there. Again, it's ugly, but it does the work for the assets that we have. And the idea is that to take this and be able to read it from a manifest file and iterate through the names rather than doing this.
Got it.
Yeah. So let's go to repo. Same type of thing applies here. These two, the repo and the proxy, are exactly more or less copy of they're the same with slight differences because they're dealing with a contract a little bit differently. I probably should have made both of these projects into a multi-SBT project, but I just don't like multi-SBT projects. Because in my opinion, it creates an artificial dependency between projects. So I prefer to make them different, but it's up to you. If you want to put them in the same SBT project, it doesn't really matter to me. It's a matter of choice than anything else. So, what can I tell you about the repo? Same type of idea, basically. You build in the Rolang. You read the binary file. You convert it from byte to hex. So basically now you expanded it. And you got to go through this log depth path. And that's a limitation of the node implementation that we have. So the node will blow up if you try to give it a string that's 10 megabytes. So you have to chunk it up. And that's what this log depth is. Basically, it just walks through the string and chunks it up. And that's this part. It keeps dividing it by 2. It does a substring, and it creates a chunked up substring so the R node could process it. Nothing. I mean, if you read it, it's nothing really earth-shattering. Makes sense so far?
Yes.
Yep, it does. It's really
Cool.
good.
And then basically you use the store contract to store it. Yeah, that's it for that. And the utils, it's the same thing. This is the one that we talked about before. Does the conversion, and this is our first version was chunking up this way, and then we changed to the log depth. But they both same type of idea. It's just this one, because it was putting everything in memory, the memory footprint was higher. So we changed to the log depth. That one is recursive. So the memory footprint turned out to be a little bit smaller. What else? Okay, let's talk about the mock data. So basically, this is where today all the data lives. All the data is, in this version, is hard-coded. And the manifest file that I'm working on, it's all coming from a manifest. But at the end of the day, if you look at this, it's just a giant map with the key value store, and the keys are the song names. And then based on that, it goes and it fetches that song by its name from the rolling contract. But it's just a giant map. Okay. So we talked about all the code, and now, yeah, I showed you the configuration, showed you the contract. Logback is just logback. So that's the acquisition. Now, did I put, okay, let me go back to proxy again. I think I put stuff in here. I don't know how much time you've spent on the intake, but one idea that I've been playing with is this manifest file. So basically, manifest file would be what the client is going to give. And the manifest file is based on, it's trying to build what it is that the client is, what it is that they're giving you. So there is, at the very top layer, there is, maybe it makes, yeah, at the very, one second, let me see if I could do this. Come on. Ah, doesn't. When I share a screen, it just really doesn't let me execute any of my other programs. No. Anyway, so I can't do it. Let's just talk in terms of this then. So the idea is basically who, which is somebody's giving you a bunch of music files, music-related files. What are they? The content, the type is music, and then the type of asset, and it basically goes through the metadata that they're giving you. So the idea is this manifest file is basically what this manifest file is what that mock in the acquisition that mock module was doing, that it would come from this manifest file. Again, this is an idea that we've been working with, so we haven't really coded it. It's just in design phase. But it's something that if you wanted to take a look, you could. All right, so that's that. Now let's talk about the build a little bit. So the build SBT, I assume there were no questions, so I'm just continuing. Cool. So here are all your dependencies. I tried to put the versions in this part and then the actual dependencies in there. You don't see any of the dependencies in the unmanaged ones because you don't have to put them in here. And then we use the universal plugin, as you know, and the Docker. In the newer version that I'll be pushing in the next today or tomorrow, we'll be building inside a Docker image. So yeah, and I will give you a walkthrough of that one too. All right, so I've been talking nonstop. Any questions?
No questions so far.
All right. So, so yeah, what I would like to suggest is go through the R chain, and then go through the most important thing is right now is to be able to build the R chain project, and this should really help.
Okay, fine. Let me try out.
Yeah, and if that doesn't help, you know, ping me. I'll be happy to jump in. It's kind of late here. I'll probably, I'm calling it a day after we're done. But tomorrow I'm available, and you can also just let me know what time works for you. Maybe I'll take a little bit of time off and then come back when you're available, and we could walk through it.
Yeah.
But give it a shot. Try to build this. It takes a little bit of time.
Okay, fine. Let me try out.
Yeah. So once you build that, then I have this script, and I will push it in tonight. That you could just run. Let's see. Is it in proxy scripts? Let's see. I have a script that basically puts, I can't remember where I put it now, that puts everything in order there. CD scripts. Okay. 1 second. Okay. Oh yeah. So yeah, basically, I'll put this in there. So in the acquisition, there will be a script, and that script basically just puts everything where they need to go for you to be able to build the project.
Okay, fine.
And then once you do that, then you have this lib folder with the latest and the greatest. Now, what I didn't tell you is or maybe I did, that we always build against the dev branch. So you want to pull the dev branch of RChain and build against that.
Got it.
The dev branch is always stable.
Yeah, okay, got it.
Cool. Very good. So let's see. You have my info, right?
Yes, we have your email. We have your email.
Okay. And I have the WhatsApp. That WhatsApp comes to my cell phone.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So my email and both of them come to my cell phone. Don't hesitate. Don't spend a whole night on a problem. Ping me. Maybe it's something simple. And like I said, Greg told me that I need to make sure you guys succeed.
Very helpful. Yep.
Thanks
for being open. Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
K1, I think one of the first steps they need to do is set up the environment, right, locally, because all the errors they're getting is because the environment was not set up.
Yeah. You need. I wrestled with this for a long time, and again, somebody else may have a different and a smarter way. But what I found that works for me best is that I need to build the RChain core project myself, and I need to build my projects myself, and that way I could make sure that I'm working against the right versions. It's just unfortunately protobuf changes. Many of them are not breaking changes, so you get very weird incompatible results when versions are out of sync. You don't necessarily get compilers.
Right. So I think our ultimate goal is to, Greg has been mentioning, is the ultimate goal is to make an MVP for a particular customer. So I think the process of doing that is building the solution, understanding our chain, understanding our proxy, understanding our acquisitions, knowing what to change, what pieces need to change in order to get to, what we're trying to do as an MVP. So that's the process, right? That's where we need to have this groundwork or the base properly developed, and the developers understand every piece of the code before they can get to that, right? That's exactly the essence of what you just explained.
So I have a couple of questions for you.
Sure.
So for the purpose of MVP, are you also developing the client portion of it?
With there's a customer portion which I think from the conversation that we had with Craig is it's going to be on the UI part. It's not going to be on the backend part, because the delivery mechanism is more or less set up. Like I was told that the RChain is already done. We don't have to do anything with RChain, and the only thing we are changing from audio data for this particular customer is going to be images and artworks. So that's probably one of the customer working. So 70 to 80% of the pieces already there. We're going to tweak the RSong piece up and make it more, like a bulk upload, for like 50 images, 100 images being sent from the front end, and the back end piece and the delivery mechanism is already there. So that's the understanding we have. So, I could be wrong.
Yeah, no, I think that's actually pretty close. The first thing that we're going to change is the intake on the web side, and it'll be images, metadata, but eventually it's also going to be song files that we want. the artist to be able to upload, and then that will have to then so we need the web development to be able to capture all that, and then be able to send it into the architecture so it could get stored on the blockchain.
Okay.
But I agree with you that knowing how all this works is going to be pretty critical.
Is a critical and a crucial piece because
yeah. Although I don't envision you. Have you guys had any experience yet writing Roland code?
Gopal, we've got Scala experience.
We've been working on Scala, but not with Erlang. Yep.
Yeah, Rolang's a little different. I think Kayvon could probably talk to that better since I've never been a Scala developer. But I believe it is different though. But it should give you, I guess, a good running start. Although we have really good tutorials, so. But I'm not sure that's going to be critical from the get-go.
Yeah, I think we have. Considering the timeline, you want to go for the low-hanging fruit, and the low-hanging fruit is I think what we discussed, that we know how to manage 4 or 5 assets, but we want to be able to manage a bulk upload using your words. So and for that, the contract doesn't have to change. And it's more of being able to be in concert with what the UI is expectations are, what the API is for these bulk uploads, and how to modify the Scala code accordingly. You're right. A lot of the code is there. It needs to be shored up. It needs to be able to upload a lot more than just 5 songs. But I think we have a framework that we could continue on.
Yeah, it's a great framework.
So I think as a first step, I think we need to let the developers set up the environment locally. Let them test, let them make sure it's working. Then we touch on the pieces of the code that we need to work on or we need to focus on immediately, and let them come back to you, once they've finished reviewing the code, study the code. I'm sure they're going to take a look at this video, let them play this video again. They'll have a, like a revision of whatever has been said and shared by you. A lot of stuff has been shared. I mean, thank you for taking so much time. And let the developers go through this, let the developers study, and then let's schedule another meeting, like 2-3 days whenever you're available. We can do it at the same time, or you could suggest some time slot that we could get in.
Yeah, let me know. I'm here to make sure that we succeed. So just let me know.
Great.
Perfect.
Hey, I don't have, Abraham, I don't have any of your email addresses. So can you put in the chat window here your emails, and then I will share the video once it's uploaded?
Absolutely, I could do that right now. So you could send it to me, and I could forward it to the rest of the guys, if that's.
Yeah, no, I'm probably going to upload it to my Google Drive, and then I'll send you the link. I'll share it and send you the link. And great. So it's probably going to take my computer a while to process it.
No problem.
Yeah.
K1, what would be the coming up to speed with all this code? I mean, what is your view? Or somebody looks at this code and it's pretty straightforward, or is it good, or there are too many pieces, too many connections, too many dependencies? I mean, what would be a good process of reviewing the code apart from just going?
So that's a really good question, and let me give you the long-winded answer. If you separate the code into, take away the deployment-related stuff, because the project is doing infrastructure as code. And the Kubernetes stuff is, if you haven't done it before, it's got a learning curve.
Right.
But fortunately, that part works. So you don't have to worry about that. It does 5 uploads, or it could do 5 million uploads. It scales. So if you take that part of it away and put a blindfold for that part and look at the Scala code, then, and the assumption being that you're comfortable with some of the libraries that are being used there, like HTTP4S, Scala Cats, and Monix. If you're comfortable with those, it really is we tried really hard to keep things as simple as possible. You saw the code, the number of lines per module. None of those modules have more than 60 lines of code.
Right.
So it's pretty light. But again, the assumption is that you feel comfortable with those libraries. And if you've done protobuf and gRPC, you're a leg ahead me when I first started this, because I had used protobuf, I hadn't used gRPC, and it just takes a little bit of getting used to it.
Okay. So Gopal, are you there?
Yep, Abraham. So Kaiwan, actually, most part of it, like in terms of Kubernetes or Scala or this HTTP4S and stuff, Scala, all this stuffs are familiar. There are some pieces, like for example, which version of the R node dependency for this RSong, those parts were not clear. Actually, they are mostly internal, which you clarified really good now. So that should really help us speed that up. And along with this, would you mind also sharing this IZO file and some of the test data files that will really help us to run some of the tests ourselves, which you usually receive from your client side?
I could share those. As an FYI, I will certainly share those, but I just also want to let you know that running tests against those will definitely take a long time. So what I did was just create like a 10-byte binary files. So you might consider doing that too, but I will share those for sure.
Okay.
I do need to get a permission from Greg first, because those are from immersion, and there is like contractual things that are way above my pay grade. So let me ask him, and then if he approves, I'll send them to you.
Sure thing. And just an FYI, we don't need anything to be production closer data. It's all about test data that we are interested in.
We only have one form. But that's what I was saying. For like majority of my tests, I didn't test against 10 megabyte of data. I just wrote a binary array to a file, and I called it IZR.
Got it.
But give me time to ask him, and I'll be happy to.
No problem.
For you. Thanks, Ken.
Gopal, anything else that you want to ask Kaivan, or?
This is really fantastic. This sufficiently covers a lot of information which we were looking for, and as well as which we were not aware of. So this will really accelerate things at the end. Thanks, Kaivan.
My pleasure.
So I just want to. It's great that you guys are really going to be digging into this, and we are still in need of creating the requirements document, exactly what it is that we want to do. So, well, Abraham, when I send you the link to the video, I'll have my contact information, and then you and I and Greg should be discussing this over the next few days.
Perfect. Will do.
All right, cool. All right,